On our second anniversary, surrounded by every guest we loved, my husband handed me divorce papers with a smile. I had a secret in my heart that night. I was carrying our child. He never gave me the chance to say it. I signed, I said nothing. And I walked away carrying two secrets, not one. My name is Tanisha, and before I tell you what happened that night, I need you to understand something. This is not just a story about a marriage that ended. This is a story about a woman who learned, the hard way, that silence can be the loudest form of strength there is. If you have ever loved someone who made you feel small, if you have ever swallowed your own joy because you were afraid of how someone else would react to it, then you already know a piece of what I went through. So stay with me. Subscribe if you have not already and drop a comment that says I'm listening, because this story has a few more turns than you might expect, and I promise you the ending is not what it looks like in the beginning. I met Carter almost 6 years ago. I was working two jobs back then, trying to build something for myself, and he walked into my life like a warm afternoon after a long winter. He was charming in that easy, effortless way some men have. He opened doors, he remembered small details about my day, he made me laugh when I did not feel like laughing. I fell for him slowly, the way you fall asleep, not all at once, but in small stages you do not notice until you are already gone. We got married 2 years before that anniversary I told you about. It was a small wedding, nothing extravagant, because Carter always said he wanted to build our life together instead of spending it all in one night. I believed him. I believed in him. In those early months of marriage, things felt good. We laughed over cheap takeout on the kitchen floor because we had not bought furniture yet. We talked about the future like it was a place we were walking toward hand in hand. But somewhere in that first year, something in Carter began to shift. It was not loud, it was not dramatic, it was quiet, the way a room gets colder before you even notice the window is open. He started coming home later. He started answering my questions with fewer words. He stopped asking me how my day went, and when I offered to tell him anyway, he would nod without really listening. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was the pressure of his job, the pressure of being a husband, the pressure of adjusting to a life that was no longer just his own. I made excuses for him because that is what love does when it is scared of losing something. It bends itself into shapes it was never meant to hold. There is something else you need to know about me, something I never told Carter, not because I was hiding it out of malice, but because I was protecting it. When I was a little girl, my grandmother, a woman who came from nothing and built something out of sheer stubbornness and vision, started putting small pieces of land and property into a trust in my name. She did this quietly over years without fanfare, because she believed that real wealth should be earned in silence and protected in silence too. By the time I was an adult, that trust had grown into something enormous, something worth well over $1 billion, spread across real estate holdings in cities I had never even visited. I did not touch it, I did not live off it. I worked my own two jobs, built my own small path, because my grandmother always told me that money you do not understand will eventually control you, and money you understand will always serve you. She wanted me to know my own strength before I ever leaned on that inheritance. So I kept it quiet. I kept it so quiet that even the man I married never knew. I did not hide this from Carter because I did not trust him. In the beginning, I hid it because I wanted him to love me for exactly who I was without a single dollar attached to my name. I wanted to know in my own heart that if everything I owned disappeared tomorrow, he would still choose me. I told myself that one day, when the timing felt right, I would sit him down and tell him everything. I just kept waiting for the right moment. I did not know then that the right moment would never come the way I imagined it. As the months rolled into our second year of marriage, the distance between us grew wider. Carter's phone became a locked box he never let out of his sight. He started taking calls in another room, lowering his voice when I walked past. When I asked him about it, he would brush it off with irritation, telling me I was imagining things, telling me I was too sensitive, telling me to trust him. And because I loved him, because I did not want to believe the quiet voice in the back of my mind, I chose to trust him, even when trust started to feel like something I was forcing instead of something I was feeling. Then one morning, everything in my world tilted sideways in the best possible way. I found out I was pregnant. I sat on the edge of the bathroom sink with that little plastic stick in my hand, and for the first time in months, I felt something break open inside my chest that was not sadness. It was joy, pure and overwhelming. I thought about Carter's face when I would tell him. I thought about how a baby might soften whatever had grown hard between us. I thought, foolishly maybe, that this news could be the bridge back to the man I fell in love with. I decided I would not tell him over a quiet dinner or a quick moment in passing. I wanted to tell him in a way that matched how big this news felt in my heart, and our second anniversary was only weeks away. I started planning immediately. I wanted that night to be beautiful, unforgettable, a night we would tell our child about one day. I booked a venue with soft golden lighting and floors that looked like they were holding their breath, waiting for something magical to happen on them. I invited our families, our closest friends, the people who had stood beside us on our wedding day. I chose a dress that made me feel like the woman Carter fell in love with all those years ago. I planned every detail, the flowers, the music, the small moments of the evening, because somewhere in my heart, I believed this night would fix everything that had quietly begun to break. In the weeks leading up to that anniversary, Carter grew even more distant, but I told myself it was just the busyness of life. I told myself that once the night arrived, once he saw how much love and effort I had poured into celebrating us, something between us would soften again. I did not tell him about the pregnancy early. I wanted to save it, to unveil it like a gift in front of the people who loved us most, a joy multiplied by witnesses. Looking back now, I understand that some silences protect us, and some silences leave us standing alone in front of a room full of people, holding a secret no one will ever know we carried. The night of our anniversary arrived, and I remember standing in that venue, watching the room fill with people we loved. My mother hugged me tightly and whispered that I looked like I was glowing, and I smiled, because she had no idea just how true that was. Carter's parents arrived, his friends from work, my closest girlfriends who had been with me through every chapter of my life. The candles were lit, the music was soft. Everyone was there, laughing, catching up, sipping champagne, waiting for the man of the hour to walk through the door. And we waited. Carter was late, later than I expected, and a small knot of worry began to form in my stomach, though I pushed it down and kept smiling at our guests, kept thanking them for coming. Kept glancing at the entrance every few minutes like a woman waiting for her whole world to walk back through the door. When he finally arrived, something about his face stopped me cold. There was no warmth in his eyes. There was no softness in the way he looked at me. He walked toward me the way a man walks toward an obligation, not toward a celebration, and every instinct in my body told me something was wrong long before he ever opened his mouth. The room fell into a hush as Carter walked to the center of it, right where I was standing, right where I had imagined announcing the most joyful news of my life just an hour later. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded set of papers, and for a moment, I genuinely did not understand what I was looking at. Then I saw the words at the top of the page, and my heart dropped somewhere I could not reach anymore. Divorce papers. He had brought divorce papers to our anniversary celebration, in front of everyone we loved, in front of my mother, in front of his own parents, in front of friends who had watched us say our vows 2 years earlier. He did not lower his voice. He did not pull me aside. He stood there in front of that entire room with a small, cruel smile curling at the corner of his mouth, and he told me he was done. He told me our marriage had run its course, that he needed something different, that he could not keep pretending things were fine when they were not. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. And I stood there in my beautiful dress, in a room full of golden light and flowers I had chosen myself, holding a secret so big it felt like it might crack me open from the inside, and I said nothing about it. I want you to understand something about that moment, because I have replayed it in my mind 1,000 times since. I had a choice standing there. I could have shouted back at him. I could have told that room full of people that I was carrying his child, that this cruelty he was displaying was happening in front of the one piece of news that might have changed everything. But something in me, some quiet, aching wisdom, told me not to. I looked at his face, at that smile that did not belong to the man I married, and I understood in an instant that telling him in that moment would not soften him. It would only give him one more thing to use against me, one more card to hold, one more way to make me feel small in front of people who loved me. So I made a decision that broke my heart even as I made it. I would not tell him, not that night, maybe not ever. I took the pen with a hand that was shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady, and I signed the papers right there in front of everyone. I did not argue, I did not beg. I did not ask him why, because some part of me already knew that whatever answer he gave would not be the truth, not the real truth, and I did not have the strength left in me to hear another lie dressed up as an explanation. I signed my name, and I felt something inside me go quiet, the way a house goes quiet after everyone has left it. Carter took the papers back, tucked them into his jacket like he had just closed a business deal, and walked out of that venue without looking back at me once. I stood there in the silence that followed, surrounded by people who did not know what to say, and I felt two things at the exact same time. I felt the unbearable weight of humiliation, of having my marriage end in front of every person who mattered to me, in the most public and cruel way possible. And underneath that, quiet and small but unmistakably present, I felt the flutter of a secret only I knew, a small life growing inside me that Carter would never get to use against me because he did not even know it existed. My mother drove me home that night. I did not cry until I was behind closed doors, and when I finally let myself break, I broke completely. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the version of Carter I fell in love with, the one who used to remember the small details of my day. I cried for the child I was carrying, who would grow up without both parents under one roof. But somewhere in the middle of all that grief, something steady began to rise in me too, something my grandmother had planted in me long before I ever understood I would need it. She used to tell me that a woman who knows her own worth does not need anyone else to confirm it, and that the moment you let someone else's cruelty define your value, you have already given away something you can never fully get back. In the weeks that followed, I did not reach out to Carter. I did not explain myself. I did not tell him about the baby, and I did not touch the inheritance my grandmother had left me, not yet. I needed time to grieve quietly, away from cameras, away from opinions, away from anyone who might try to tell me how I should feel about a man who had humiliated me on what should have been one of the most beautiful nights of my life. I leaned on my mother, on my closest friends, on the version of myself that had been building quietly in the background long before Carter ever walked into my life. As my pregnancy progressed, I finally made the decision to step fully into the life my grandmother had built for me. I met with the people who managed the trust, sat through hours of meetings about properties and holdings I had only ever seen on paper, and slowly, piece by piece, I began to understand the scale of what had been placed in my hands. It was overwhelming, humbling, and in a strange way, healing. I was building something real, something mine, at the exact moment my life with Carter had ended. I did not do it out of spite. I did not do it to prove anything to him. I did it because it was time, because I had a child coming, and because the woman I was becoming needed a foundation strong enough to hold both of us. Word travels fast in certain circles, and it did not take long before news of a young woman quietly stepping into control of a massive real estate portfolio began to spread. I never sought attention for it. I never gave interviews or made announcements. But eventually, someone Carter knew mentioned my name in passing, and I heard through the same distant channels that word had reached me that he had gone very still when he heard it, that he had asked question after question, trying to understand how the woman he divorced in front of a room full of people had somehow become the owner of an empire worth more money than he could probably imagine. He reached out to me eventually. I was not surprised. I let the calls go unanswered for a long time, not out of cruelty, but because I needed to protect the peace I had finally built for myself and for my son, who by then had been born into a world his father did not yet know he was part of. When I finally agreed to see Carter months later, it was not out of a desire to reconcile. It was because I believed, somewhere deep down, that he deserved to know the truth about the child he had, even if he did not deserve anything else from me. I remember his face when I told him. The shock in his eyes was unmistakable, and beneath that shock, something that looked almost like grief, the realization of everything he had missed, everything he had thrown away in one careless, cruel moment in front of a room full of people. He asked me why I never told him about the pregnancy that night, and I looked at him for a long moment before I answered. I told him the truth. I told him that in the second it took him to hand me those papers with that cruel smile on his face, he had already told me everything I needed to know about how he would have treated that news. I told him that some information is not meant to be handed to people who have already shown you they cannot be trusted with your heart. He asked, of course, about the money, about the properties, about how all of it had come to be. I told him about my grandmother, about the trust she built in silence because she believed real strength does not need an audience. I told him I had planned to share that part of my life with him eventually, when I felt safe enough, when our marriage felt solid enough to hold that kind of truth without it changing how he saw me. I told him that he had answered that question for me before I ever had the chance to ask it myself, the night he chose cruelty over patience, the night he chose an audience over a conversation. Carter tried in his own way to find a path back into my life. He apologized. He said things had gotten out of hand, that he had been dealing with pressures of his own that he never explained to me, that he regretted the way everything unfolded more than he could put into words. I listened to him because I believed he deserved the chance to say what he needed to say. But listening is not the same as forgetting, and it is not the same as returning to something that has already been broken beyond the shape it once held. I told him, as gently and as honestly as I could, that our story as husband and wife had already ended the night he made that choice in front of everyone we loved. What remained now was only the story of a father and a son, and that story would move forward on very different terms than the ones he was used to. These days, my life looks nothing like it did on that anniversary night. I run the properties my grandmother left me with the same quiet determination she taught me, building slowly, thoughtfully, without needing anyone's applause to know the work is meaningful. I watch my son grow, and every single day I am reminded of why I made the choices I made, why I stayed silent when silence protected something sacred, and why I finally spoke when speaking served the truth instead of someone else's cruelty. If there is one thing I want you to carry with you from my story, it is this. You do not owe every person access to every part of your joy, especially not the people who have already shown you they do not know how to hold it gently. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay quiet, not because you are weak, but because you are protecting something too precious to hand to someone who has not earned the right to see it. I lost a marriage that night, but I never lost myself, and in the end, that turned out to be the only thing that truly mattered. If this story moved you, if any piece of it reminded you of your own strength, your own silence, your own quiet rebuilding after heartbreak, I want to hear from you. Like this video, subscribe for more stories like mine, and tell me in the comments about a time you protected your own peace by choosing silence over an audience that did not deserve your truth. Share this with someone who needs to hear that walking away with dignity is its own kind of victory. And if you are in the middle of your own beautiful, painful moment right now, know this. Whatever you're carrying quietly today might just be the very thing that carries you forward tomorrow.